You don't need more strategy. You need less noise. If your business has ever or currently feels bloated, busy, complicated, or heavy, it's not a sign to add more. It's actually a signal to stop, break check, and subtract. So let's talk about why clarity, capacity, and peace are the actual real tools needed to scale. What if building and scaling your business had nothing to do with more tactics and actually everything to do with letting go? But what are we letting go of? Trying to check all the boxes to get every single thing done. Because most entrepreneurs, myself included, overbuild. We overcomplicate and we do it accidentally. But the ones that truly build, scale, and thrive in the process, they've learned how to subtract. And they subtract strategically and, most importantly, unapologetically. Not because the world needs to know or approve of it, because they know what needle moves the ball in their game. So welcome to the Mind of George Show. This is the place where entrepreneurs discover that true scaling isn't about hacks and tactics unless you're using subtraction as the tactic. It's about aligning your mindset, your message, and your marketing to create sustainable growth that feels authentic and, most importantly, aligned to who you are and where you want to go. And I am stoked that you are here with me today. And if you're new here, welcome to the show. It doesn't matter whether you're building your first 5 or 6-figure business or scaling beyond 7 and 8. I promise you, my life on the line, you're going to find something here that speaks to your soul and your business. And in today's episode, I'm walking you through one of the most powerful tools, the thing I use for every single client, every company I help scale. And I'm going to walk you through the exact mindset, framework, and the reflection process that I use with high-performing entrepreneurs. And the reason we do this is because it simplifies their business and it allows them to scale with confidence and peace. So I want to talk to you about what subtraction really means, how to identify what's no longer aligned and working, and why letting go of those things is actually your next level of leadership or business. Because if our businesses, myself included, if it feels heavy, complex, or chaotic, the hard pill to swallow is understanding that more strategy won't fix it. It will just make it worse. We don't need to go faster. We actually need to go cleaner. And so subtraction isn't just a tactic. It's required at every stage of business, every time we hit a roadblock, and it creates a massive transformation. And I found some crazy, crazy statistics for you. I literally am pulling them up right now because they're so good. But I found that 80% of entrepreneurs say that complexity is self-created. 90%, and this I can speak to from all my clients, of high-performing brands or businesses thrive and scale by focusing on 1 to 3 items, whether that's offers, lead magnets. And productivity drops 40% when multitasking is normalized. And then let's take it in the client bucket. Simplicity increases customer retention up to 3 times when not using it. So in this episode, I break down the 3 types of subtraction that you can use to unlock the next level of scale, the 4-question clarity audit that I use in myself and my clients, and why simplicity increases your capacity and, truthfully, your business conversions. And so I wouldn't look at this episode as just like a permission slip or a way to refocus. It's genuinely a playbook, one that you should execute the moment you listen to it, and one that you should keep coming back to every time you feel like you're hitting a ceiling. So let's strip out all the noise. I always joke that I go into my clients' businesses with scissors, but those scissors are what allow you to scale. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. I have a question. What if the secret to scaling your business didn't come from addition, but instead it came from distraction? What if the secret was removing things instead of adding them, right? More offers, more funnels, more complexity. That's what ends up keeping most people stuck, not actually helping us grow. And in this episode, I'm going to show you why subtraction is the fastest way to scale and how to know what to let go of. And so I'm stoked you're here. It's overall season. I'm enjoying the Montana weather, but I got my overalls out and I feel great. That has nothing to do with today's episode, but it just hit my heart for some reason. But I want to talk about this concept seriously because in doing this for 20 years, this has been the number one counterintuitive strategy / tactic that works every single time. And so if you are that person in this moment or ever in the past or currently facing this where you've been piling on more tools, right? Or adding more tasks to your day or adding more calls to your calendar, adding more tactics in hopes that they're going to grow or build the business. But any of those things that you're doing, they still feel heavy. They feel overwhelming. It feels like your calendar is drowning you, even though you made it. You're inconsistent with some of them, or they actually just don't feel like something you want to do. My hope and my invitation and maybe my desire is that this episode feels like a giant breath of fresh air for you, because I'm going to walk you through the actual mechanics of subtracting, what buckets exist in your business, right? The levels of subtraction that we call them, and then the questions to ask yourself to be able to start subtracting things that are actually getting in the way of you growing. So I'm going to go through the mechanics of subtraction, how we can utilize that as a growth strategy. And then truthfully, this is what took me the longest to learn, why the most scalable businesses are simple. And when we think about this, one of the analogies that I like to use all the time with my clients is working out, right? Because we all can work out, right? And so if we're working out and we're working on running and we want to be faster at running, we start running, we increase our time, we increase our distance, and we keep doing it. But if in that process we're like, oh, well, now I want to do this yoga, I want to do this mobility, I want to add weightlifting here, I want to do XYZ, all of a sudden our capacity gets pulled and it stops us from doing the thing that was actually working, which is running, right? When I say to people all the time that scale comes from subtraction and not addition, we have to understand that the habits we have, the behaviors, the strategies that we're executing, where we're spending our time, how we're spending our time, they work for a season and every season is different, but they don't always work forever. There's always this invitation when we start to feel these things that I've described to pause, to stop, to triage, and then to reassess. Just like with running, if I had been running every day for 12 weeks and then all of a sudden it stopped working, I wasn't getting faster and my legs were sore, I wasn't recovering, the worst thing I could do is add more to that or keep going at the same pace and the same way and expect something to change. And so we have to understand that subtraction means really at its core, subtracting all the things, all the noise, all the complexity that gets in the way of the simple things that are proven to work. And so the first thing that we have to understand is like, what does it cost us when we think more is always the answer, right? Because when we think about this as entrepreneurs, there's always going to be more to do. There's going to be more posts to be made, more ways to refine the messaging, more calls to do, more trainings, more courses, more insert whatever other thought you're having right now. There's always going to be more. But we have to slow down and ask ourselves why we add more. And I would submit that 9 out of 10 times, we're not adding more out of actual proven data-driven strategy. We're adding more out of insecurity, right? If I just launch one more offer, if I build one more funnel, if I create one more X, if I do another training, we tend to fall into this trap where we think it's more, 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 more. But if I'm sticking with this working out analogy, if I'm making progress running and I'm like, I want to make progress faster and I add too much and I overtrain, I'm actually going to regress backwards because it's the simple measurable things that we do consistently over time that work. Because when we really start to understand what this more trap costs us, it costs us a lot of confusion because it creates massive amounts of complexity, right? And we think about our businesses like online businesses. We have social platforms, we have AI, we have calls, we have email sequences. The last thing that we need to be doing is adding more complexity into an already sometimes complex world, but we need to be craving simplicity and working towards getting it. Because when there's massive complexity, we know it creates confusion. But if it's just you as a solopreneur, it just feels like you can never get ahead. You have sticky notes on sticky notes, notebooks on notebooks. But if you have a team, your team is like, what are we doing? Why are we changing lanes so fast? Why are we shifting? Why haven't we done that thing? And the hidden byproduct of all of that is that it ultimately affects your customers. And when there's complexity on the back end of our business because we're doing more or we've created too much, and then it starts to affect our customers and their results or the way that we help them, it starts to create this cycle because the customers will start to pull away or will feel overwhelmed because they don't feel supported. And then we try to add more onto it. And it's just this vicious cycle that breaks us. So we end up with this massive amount of bloat and we lose in the process, right? Us being the entrepreneur, us being the podcast host, us being the coach, right? The amount of clients that I've had that love their clients, but they're like, I don't have the capacity to serve my clients. I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. They're messaging me all the time. And when we unpack it, we realize it's got nothing to do with the customers. It's from all the bloat in the business. And the bloat that's actually detracting their attention, draining their capacity, isn't adding to the bottom line of the business. It's actually subtracting from the bottom line of the business. So when we fall into this more trap, we end up getting massively bloated and we sacrifice ourselves in the process. We lose energy, we lose excitement, we lose confidence. And then those results that we had, they start slowing down. And to compensate, we try to feed it more and it just compounds over and over and over again. And so to be aware of the noise trap or the more trap, what we need to understand is just this simple line. We don't need more strategies. We need less noise. We don't need more strategies. We need less noise. Because when we think about subtraction, it has probably been the most powerful tool that I've ever used on myself, but also my clients. The physical products brands that I'm helping scale right now, the tech platforms that I'm helping scale, my coaching clients that I'm helping scale. 9 out of 10 times, it's not because there's a missing strategy or tactic or a missing hack that we don't know or a missing email that we didn't send. It's that those things that do work aren't happening because of all the distraction or the noise that's happening. And so when we really understand what lever is being pulled that creates the biggest result, it came from removing things, not adding things. Because when we think about building our business or scaling our business, it actually is about clarity, not chaos. It's not about complexity or chaos. It's about clarity. When I do X, Y happens and it equals Z. And so we have to fall in love with simplicity, but I also feel very called to share this right now. We also have to fall in love with boring. Because one of the things that I haven't addressed yet and I haven't talked about yet is sometimes why we add more. And sometimes why we add more is because we get bored with the way that things are doing, the way that things are going, or the way in which we're doing them. And so to get a dopamine hit, we add more so that we have this drive or fire in us. And it ends up creating this feast and famine cycle over and over and over again. But the goal is understanding that simplicity, meaning we're subtracting things that are getting in the way and coming back to simplicity, it increases clarity for us. It increases customer retention. It creates massive amounts of internal peace by knowing where we're spending our time, why we're spending it there, and how it's working. And it also increases team buy-in if you have it. Because when people know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and it's simple, we can execute it and we can do it in excellence. But a really good way to remember this when it comes to building or scaling your business, and this is the benefit of me coaching in so many industries and so many successful people that coach me back and share lessons with me all the time, is I heard one of my incredible clients say this a couple months ago, and he said, you can't scale what you can't repeat, and you can't repeat what's overbuilt. You can't scale what you can't repeat, and you can't repeat what's overbuilt. So a tangible example of this is I helped a client with this, and this client is on Instagram and they make reels, right? Really good at making reels. The reels work. But then they wanted to remove themselves from the process and be able to do it differently. So they built out this very robust process. Multiple people were involved. And then the only thing that happened is more people were involved. They were producing less reels, less were going up, and less people were coming in because the process itself wasn't repeatable or scalable because it became so complex. And so sometimes the most simplistic way is the best way to keep doing it. And our job is to protect that, not complicate it. Okay. And so now we're going to move into understanding, because there's two parts left for this. There's the 3 levels of subtraction, and then the 4 questions that I'm going to give you for you to write down, for you to set a date with yourself, like pause this when you're done, sit down 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and ask yourself these questions, but allow yourself to go through these questions. It's like pulling the ripcord of your parachute, which slows you down and pulls you above your business to look at it, look at your day, look at your time, and be able to choose how you use it. Okay. So, first is, what are the buckets or levels of subtraction? Well, when it comes to any entrepreneur, physical product, digital product, there's really like 3 core areas that I see subtraction needing to happen. And these 3 core areas are what have the biggest results. Okay. So bucket number 1 or level number 1 is operational subtraction. Number 2 is offer subtraction. And number 3 is identity subtraction. So what's operational subtraction? This is a lot of the examples I gave. These are our systems, our daily tasks, our meetings, our dashboards, right? Things that are complex. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who was waiting like 7 weeks to see this dashboard of their numbers to know what choices to make. And finally, I was like, just put it in a freaking Google Doc and have it updated every day. Sure as crap, it worked. And who says you can't run it in a Google Doc, right? Or some of us that end up getting accidentally pulled into meetings about meetings about meetings, but all that meeting time is distracting from needle moving time, right? So operational subtraction is anything operational. So our systems, the flow that we follow to record a podcast, how we do client notes after a call, how we create content, the tasks that we're following, meetings or dashboards. So that's one bucket or one level of subtraction. The second bucket or level of subtraction is what we call offer subtraction. This is, as it states, our products, our services, bonuses, and how we pay teams, payment plans for clients, right? It's us really making sure that we're focusing on what moves the needle in the business, not complicating it, not having hundreds of choices, right? And even for physical products companies that I help, if you're a physical products company, you know this, but most of the time, if it's a supplement, a skincare, whatever the case is, 80% of the revenue comes from 3 of the products, even though there might be 30 other products or 60 other products. And as an entrepreneur in service or consulting or coaching or course sales, you'll recognize that a good majority in meat of the people that are coming in or the revenue of your business is actually coming from a very small subset of that offer suite. And so offer subtraction is making sure we're aware that that bucket exists of things that we can change, that we can shift, that we can alter, that we don't want to complicate. And then the third one is not the popular one, but it's the best one, is the identity subtraction bucket, right? Or the identity subtraction level. So this is where we get really wrapped up, or the word would be endowed to how we've done things, right? These are titles, roles, expectations, labels that we're clinging to that no longer support us, right? Just because we've done this role for a whole year doesn't mean that continuing to do that role is the best for the business or the best for our growth. Just because we had the title, like for me, I was the CEO until I made Ashley the CEO, and she way more deserves that title than I do. But just because I have a title, just because I have a role, just because I've been on all these meetings for a year doesn't mean that right now in this season, I need to be on all those meetings. Maybe I can reduce it. Maybe they can brief me. Maybe like, hey, you guys don't need me on this meeting. We're going to have to change our meeting structure. But we have to be willing to look in that bucket so that we can subtract those parts of our identity that are keeping us stuck or following this path that we're like, we have to, because this is how we've done it and it's the only way. And so those are the three buckets or the three levels of subtraction that most of the answers to these questions you're going to find in. And when I go into companies, the bucket that I always start with, or just coaching a solopreneur or a big company, is actually the identity, right? What are these expectations of myself? What am I thinking? Like, why am I always doing this? Why am I the one? I always start with identity first, then I move into operationally, and then I move into offer in that order. Okay. But you've heard me say this before. Alex Sharfin has said this for years, is that basically you don't have the business you want because you haven't become the person to run it. Well, that's where the identity level really, really comes in, because every new level of leadership or growth actually requires of letting go who we were at the last one, right? So when we smash up into that ceiling, it's not like, oh, what more can I add to get through? It's actually, what can I take off to create space for this next new level? So what I want to give you right now is I want to give you the 4 questions to sit with, to actually journal on, to actually utilize, to know what to subtract. Okay. And these questions are huge. And I might even get a little woo woo with these ones. Okay. So I'm going to give you the 4 questions and I'm going to explain them. Okay. So question number 1 is, what feels heavy, forced, or energetically off? Now, remember, there's 3 buckets we're going through. That could be, what is it in the operational bucket? What is it in the offer bucket? What is it in the identity bucket? You might not have an answer for each bucket, but you have at least one answer under this question. So what feels heavy, forced, or energetically off? Because I promise you, your body knows what no longer fits. It knows. You're having resistance. You're dreading it. You're not showing up. We need to be willing to ask these questions and sit with the answer so we can unpack them and find a solution. Okay. So question 1, what feels heavy, forced, or energetically off? Question number 2, what's performing below the effort it takes to maintain it? What's performing below the effort that it takes to maintain it? So this is where you're going to actually evaluate the ROI, or the return on investment of your energy. And I think there's 2 very distinct buckets here. Bucket number 1 is revenue. Bucket number 2 is resonance. Because all of us know that you can sacrifice yourself as much as you want, but eventually you're not going to want to do it anymore, even if it makes revenue. So both of them are important metrics. Revenue is this contributing to my bottom line, right? When I go do X, when I do a podcast tour, when I go keynote, is when I'm spending my time in those buckets, is it actually having an ROI in my business and helping me grow and scale my business? And the buckets are clear. Does it bring me joy? Do I feel aligned with it? Am I excited to do it? That's resonance. And is it creating revenue or relationship opportunities to create revenue? Okay, so that's question 2. What's performing below the effort it takes to maintain it? Number 3, what no longer reflects your current vision, values, or your audience? What no longer, where you're spending your time in one of those 3 buckets, reflects your current vision, your values, or your audience. Because if it is from a past version of you or a past belief of you, it may actually be a liability right now. And I will use myself as a tangible example. If you have listened to this podcast for any length of time, you will remember the moment where I stopped swearing. I used to drop F-bomb after F-bomb after F-bomb. I used to coach people and be really aggressive and yell and be like, you don't get to do that. And that version of me, those values no longer aligned with who I was, because Jesus loves me and brought me home. And it shifted me. It shifted me on who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up. Just like I used to make content going and looking at people's funnels and calling them out publicly about what they were doing incorrectly or wrong. And then I was like, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to be known. I want to speak highly of people in a room. I want to find the positive in things. And then if I really don't like the way they're doing it, I can reach out and offer help. And I do that now, right? But there's ways in which I used to show up that no longer support who I am now or where I want to be. And so the third question is, what no longer reflects your current vision? Meaning, are the actions, behaviors, places you're spending your time right now aligned with the current vision of where you want to be? Is it aligned with your current values of what you believe to be true? Is it aligned with the audience that you're speaking to? That's question number 3. And then question number 4. And this one tickles. What am I keeping out of fear, not out of alignment? What am I keeping out of fear, not out of alignment? Well, I can't stop going to this meeting because then they're not going to value me anymore. Or I can't wait to respond to working hours to my client because then they're going to fire me. Right? What is the thing that you're keeping out of fear, not out of alignment? I actually heard this from a client a couple of months ago who has a podcast. And for the first time since launching the podcast, they took a break. Like, I'm just not posting one. And I had a visceral reaction because I have never missed a publishing day on this podcast for the days that they go, even almost 700 episodes in, because I actually have a fear that if I miss, you'll stop listening, you won't come back, you won't listen anymore. And I don't know if that fear is true because they took a break. They came back and they got more people who listened. Now that was just them, but I can't operate like just because I've done it one way that I can keep doing it that way and not try something different. And so luckily for me, I love doing this podcast. I love showing up for this podcast. It's not something that's out of alignment. I look forward to it every day. But we have to ask ourselves is what are we keeping out of fear, not alignment? And we have to be really, really honest with ourselves. Because what happens here psychologically is we end up with sunk cost bias. We're like, well, I've done this much. I've gone this far. I just have to do it this way. We do this in relationships. We do this with time. We do this with money. We do this everywhere. But truthfully, the longer we continue to do something out of fear and not alignment, the cost actually increases and it doesn't ever get any better with time. And so the fourth question is, what am I keeping out of fear, not alignment? And so what I want you to do is when you're done listening to this, like take this seriously and give yourself a date. Set 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes aside, but actually block it in your calendar. And I want you to sit down, pen and paper, and I want you to answer these 4 questions. What feels heavy, forced, or energetically off? What's performing below the effort it takes to maintain it? What no longer reflects your current vision, values, or audience? And what are you keeping out of fear and not alignment? And when it comes to building and scaling your business, scaling comes from subtraction. The answers to these questions are the places in which we get to start subtracting, and they're going to fall into one of 3 buckets. They're either going to be in the operational bucket, the offer bucket, or the identity bucket. And when we're willing to look at them and we're willing to make incremental changes, what we're really doing is cutting out all the noise and protecting what we know. When we do this, when we execute this, it creates the results that I'm looking for. And I know sometimes I'm really insecure about this. Actually, I'm going to own this as you listen to this about some of the things that I say and the statements that I say, that they sound cheesy because they're so simple. And they sound pedantic because we hear them all the time. But I think the reason we hear them all the time is because they work as long as we're willing to believe them. Because I know to be true that growth is not about doing more. It's about us becoming more, changing our perspective, having discipline, having these self-awareness conversations, looking at where we're spending our time and being intentional and methodical about it. And in order for us to become more, the first step is actually letting go of what's in the way. You have to let go of what's in the way. And I can remember hundreds of moments where like I never missed a call. I'd never rescheduled a call for years. And finally I got so sick that I had to reschedule calls. And everyone's like, dude, you're allowed to be human. I'm not going to fire you as my coach because you need a week off. But I had this fear in me that if I miss a call, I'm not valuable. If I miss a call, they're going to fire me. And I drove in that for years. I worked sick. My body was sick longer. I was really upset. I wasn't on my best performance, right? Or the most present I could ever be. And it wasn't until it actually broke me and I released that expectation and that attachment that it started to shift. But in order for us to become more, in order for us to operate our businesses intentionally, we have to release the things that are in the way. We have to cut out all the noise that's distracting us. And we actually have to look at the pieces on the board. Because I believe, and I know to be true, that the simpler your business is, the faster it can scale. The simpler your business is, the faster it can scale. And for all the case studies I've shared on this podcast, for my biggest wins in business, it wasn't they got to 100 million because they were so busy. No, they got to 100 million because they focused on one product. They got to $1 million a year as a coach because they focused on one offer. They got to 100,000 followers on social media because they focused on one platform. They got the results they were looking for in the gym because all they focused on was their diet and workout. We are surrounded by examples that the simpler we make everything, the faster we can get the results that come from it, and the faster it can scale. And so I would leave you with this. Simplicity amplifies power. Simplicity amplifies the speed at which the result comes. Simplicity does that because it allows us to get more reps, to learn more, and adjust more, to be able to focus on what actually moves the needle. And so if any of this resonated with you, if any of this landed for you, if you're feeling overwhelmed or like things are too complicated or like, why did I stop doing it that way? It was working and it was easy. Here's your challenge. All I want you to do is to pick one thing to subtract from your business this week that falls into one of those questions. Could be a task, could be a tool that you're using, could be an offer, could be a belief. It could be something in the personal bucket. Maybe the belief is, I can't work out and take care of my body because I don't have time. Well, maybe the reason you don't have time is because you're not prioritizing it, and that's what's getting in the way of your business. Or maybe it's a boundary that you're going to subtract. You're going to subtract the lack of boundary and add it back in. Maybe you put a hard stop. I'm not allowed on my phone past 7 p.m. I can respond to everybody the next day. Only you know what's resonating right now. Only you know what it is, that thing that you're thinking of, and only you can actually shift it. But that's my challenge for you this week. And if I can help you in any way, shoot me a DM on Instagram, book a call on my calendar. It's linked on the website. Let me help you. I love this. And I would say the most important thing to remember about this is that you should constantly fall in love with subtracting. There is no finish line in subtraction because every time you remove something, our default and the world's default is to give us more and stack more. And so this should become normal. Is this still aligned? Is this still giving me an ROI? Do I still feel aligned with this? Is this still generating revenue? I know that's how I did it, but is there a different way to do it? Can I reduce this down? And you need to fall in love with this process because no matter what you do, how big you get, it's going to be a consistent refinement process that you're constantly subtracting things that are diluting the things that are actually working and that actually matter. And so I want to share that with you today because I get asked this a lot and it's been coming up in conversations a lot. And it really, really is the secret to scale. So just remember that scaling will always come from subtraction and not addition. Because what you're subtracting are all the things that are getting in the way of you focusing on the things that actually create the results that you desire. And so I love you to pieces. I hope you found this helpful. At minimum, would you please just shoot me an Instagram message and let me know if it landed? Let me know if I'm crazy. Let me know if you're even listening to the podcast. You still listen. I really love the two-way street. And sometimes I forget because it feels like an echo chamber. And so I appreciate you. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms. I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're done.